Okay. It's always confusing because it doesn't ever look like, okay, now it looks live. So maybe we're live now. Okay. So welcome everyone. For those of you just joining, my name is Crystal with the Dog Psychology and Training Center. And today's topic is tail biting, specifically severe tail biting that involves either tail raw, or we've even had some families contact us whose dogs have actually chewed the tip of their tail off. So it can be a very serious thing, not to mention the pain that causes the dog, but leading to infections and a whole bunch of other like raw nerve endings, super, super bad. So a question posed to us a few days ago that said, I have a 3-year-old German Shepherd. The last few months has been eating his tail raw. He's on Apaquel for itching, but he's still eating it in up by his bottom, and she's tried everything anyone has ever suggested. She's tried. So thanks for submitting that, Julie. I can hear your desperation. I feel your desperation. We had a pit bull who I don't know what you would call it, but his ears, because he would shake his head so hard, they would turn into like balloons and they would swell up and you could just feel the air in them. And so we'd have to go to the vet and they'd have to cut his ear and put a drainage tube in it. And that was it. Like they didn't cover it or anything. So we'd have like blood splatter up the ceiling and on the walls. And it was just like, how can this be a solution? And then his ears have healed. And now he was a pit bull with cauliflower ears. But we figured out how to get his ears so that before they'd actually get those air pockets, he would shake them so hard that the tips of them would bleed. And so we got really good at wrapping body parts that are loose from the body, like ears and tails, so that they don't splatter all over the house. And it makes it harder for the dog to act to keep them irritated or raw or bleeding. So we'll help out with some of those suggestions as well. But first, I want to start by just saying if it's not a behavioral manifestation, then we can't really fix it. We can help with like palliative support during his healing, but ultimately, if it is a medical problem, we need to find the underlying problem to figure out what's causing him to chew his tail and get that resolved so that he doesn't have that urge anymore. If it is a behavioral manifestation like OCD or stress or something like that, we can totally help, with training and monitoring and prevention, eliminate this bad habit. That's exactly what it becomes. Dogs, unlike us humans, us adult humans, I should say, we know that if we get a mosquito bite and we itch it, it feels so good, right? But we also know to not keep itching it, because the more we itch it, the more it's going to keep itching, right? The more severe it's going to feel. And so small children, we often have to catch our kids and say, stop itching it. You're just going to make it worse. Dogs don't know that either. And so they will keep itching it and biting and nibbling at it until it is what you have now, that open in those hot spots that can become very serious infection risks and other medical problems. So let's start with some medical things. I know you've went to the vet and he put you on Apaquel, so and he's still doing it. So question one is, how long has he been on the Apaquel? Sometimes it can take 4 to 6 weeks to really kind of get all of those old allergens out of the bloodstream, or for like the Apaquel to really kind of take effect. So you want to give that kind of stuff time to see a result. So how long has he been on it? If he's been on it longer than those 6 weeks and he's still itching, then obviously there's no point keeping him on it if he's still doing it, unless it's helping. So you definitely, decide if with your vet, if that's something that should be continued or if it's something that should be stopped and try something else. I also assume that if you've taken him to the vet, they've tested for parasites and things like that. A lot of times that rear end itching can be caused by fleas and intestinal parasites. And so that makes that rump side of the body really itchy. And so the dog could be chewing on his bottom and his tail for those reasons. But I assume your vet did a stool culture and checked for parasites like fleas and ticks. Another suggestion that I would have is acupuncture and chiropractic care. So a lot of times when regular or standard practicing veterinarians can't find a problem, I myself and my husband, we often, if our family doctor can't find a prognosis, and we go to our holistic doctor, who's a doctor of acupuncture, medicine, and Chinese medicine, herbals, she'll be like, "Oh, here, take this, it'll help," and it does. And it's like, how did you know that? Like, my doctor was so stumped, and we've just stopped questioning her, because every time she's told us to do something, it's worked. So, for example, all of my pregnancies, I have had acid reflux, heartburn so bad that last, month or two of my pregnancy, that I would be throwing up. I couldn't lay down. It was awful. And the doctors were just like, "That's part of being pregnant." And so I just accepted it until by the time I had my third baby, or was pregnant with my third baby, I met Dr. Marina, and she was like, "Oh, just no dairy and no cold foods." And wouldn't you know, I didn't have any more heartburn. And so acupuncture it's amazing. I don't understand all of it, but I do know that they often find things or understand things that standard veterinarians just aren't taught in school, and so they don't know to look for it. So check with an acupuncturist. We do have a canine acupuncturist in Greenville. We have two, actually. So one I know is not currently accepting patients. She's on maternity leave. Woo. Well, she's soon to have a baby, so she took time off in advance for the baby and maternity leave, but she will be coming back in a few months. And then the other one is up in Travelers Rest. I can't think of her name, but it's all about pets. And she does acupuncture, chiropractic, and standard veterinary medicine. So she kind of balances it out. If it's something that can be done with standard veterinary medicine, she's going to do it. If it's better with acupuncture or chiropractic, she'll offer that as well. So that definitely is an idea. And then we also have the chiropractor we use, Dr. Natasha, who is a traveling chiropractor. So she does horses and dogs, and she's often kind of traveling all around the upstate. So that could be an option for you. I think you do live closer to the Anderson area. So if that is, well, the vet you go to at least is in that area. So I assume if you get on her website or Facebook, and you can kind of send her an email and ask her where she's going to be, or if she's going to be in your area, it might be a closer meetup for you, because she does travel all the way, around the upstate. But it's amazing to me that how much can be fixed, managed, alleviated with alternative medicine. And so one thing we're really big into is continuing education, not just specifically dog training and dog behavior and dog philosophy and methods, but everything holistically. So we hear from veterinarians, we hear from acupuncturists, we hear from chiropractors, we hear from groomers and daycare owners. And we really want to get a holistic view of the life of a dog, right? And how all of these things impact behavior. And so when we went to a couple seminars to listen to acupuncture and chiropractic care for dogs, I was just blown away of the problems that were submitted to them and the results that they were able to get, where most of these dogs, their regular vets said that, like, they're on their last leg. Like, we don't know what else to do, just comfort them at this point. And then they would go to an acupuncturist or a chiropractor, and all of a sudden the dog could walk again, or all of a sudden the hair started growing back, or all of a sudden all the allergies the dogs had in life are gone, or the dog's no longer bothered by them. And so definitely check out acupuncture or chiropractic care. You can Google if there's any closer to you in that area. I'm not too familiar with that area, so I only know of the ones local to Greenville, but that definitely could be a possibility. If the chewing of the tail is stress related, so I know with COVID, it threw the whole world upside down, dogs included. And so that tons of families were at home and staying at home for way longer than they've ever done before. And then suddenly were called back to work. And so if that was something that happened to you guys, then this could be a stress-related problem for your dog. Just environmental changes can throw your dog's life out of whack and can cause some anxious behaviors like this. It could be a move. It could be a new friend or family member or roommate staying with you. Any type of life changes that are stressful for us, but we just kind of go with it because, it's the good kind of stress, can also impact your dog. So see if anything like that could be a culprit. If it is, then maybe some CBD chews or oils will help alleviate some of that anxiety and stress and tension while we're doing the healing process. And then once we get past the healing process, hopefully that stress has been alleviated. And then you can, we take off the CBD or stop giving the CBD and see if your dog can be balanced without it. Let's see. Food allergies. This is another huge culprit that vets may say your dog might have a food allergy, and then they put you on one of their prescription diets that are really expensive without actually telling you what your dog's allergic to. So you don't even know if that prescription diet has your dog's allergen in it, and you're paying out the wazoo. And so we had a couple dogs that had allergies really bad. My Schnauzer was like always, he's supposed to be a gray Schnauzer. He always had, those yeast stains and on his hands because he'd always lick his paws. And so he clearly had allergies, and our vet was just kind of like, yeah, your dog has food allergies. And it wasn't until we started feeding raw food, so raw meat, raw vegetables, where we could actually know what we were giving our dogs for 2 months, because 4 to 6 weeks before you can see a difference. So we went 2 months on this diet. And if we didn't see anything negative, then we would switch a meat source out. So, or a vegetable out. And then we'd only do one switch at a time because you want to know what caused it. So it can take a while. But if you're patient, you can really weed out what your dog's allergens are, so you know to avoid those if you choose to go back to kibble or continue feeding raw. We found our dogs were allergic to chicken and pork, and those are the two most common ingredients in most dog foods and dog treats. And so once we figured that out, all of that red yeasty look that Pepper had started to get better. So if you can feed raw, I highly recommend it. I know it sounds really gross and disgusting, but it is the most natural food source for your dog. It is the easiest for their body to digest. So again, talking about stress in the body, it is the easiest for your dog to process, whereas kibble takes a lot of energy and time in the body to break down and get absorbed, whereas raw food, because it's natural for dogs, naturally gets absorbed much, much, much quicker. And I did create an ebook. I'll post a link to that also in the comments. But raw food is the easiest way to find food allergens. And so we tested chicken and pork a couple times to make sure maybe there was something outside that triggered an allergic response, or whatever. We'd make up excuses, but you get to be in control to test it so that you know for sure. We tested it enough to know every single time we gave them chicken. All of our dogs were allergic to chicken. And then Pepper was allergic to pork and chicken. I think it was Pepper, maybe Morgan. We just avoid all chicken and pork now. But we tested it enough to know. So it's like 100% in my head, avoid chicken and pork, period. So those are some of my alternative medical suggestions for you to explore other than standard veterinary medicine. And so check those out, go through those processes, because if it is something caused by one of those above things, everything I'm about to tell you isn't going to fix it. It's just going to help prevent it from getting worse. But your dog's still going to have this need, this urge, this compulsion to keep chewing. Okay, so you really need to weed out those things I mentioned above to make sure this is not something that is medical. It needs to be addressed from the inside so that we can stop the brain from wanting to go down the same pattern. Prevention and training. So that's the second half. That's what we're going to talk about now. So I don't know what you're using for preventative right now, but I would recommend the old school annoying hard plastic cones that would bruise your leg as your dog would come by or get them caught on the corner. I know they're not as comfortable or convenient as the new softer, they have like the bubble cone that goes around their neck, or like the softer ones that bend around their face. Those are okay for certain things, but for this particular problem, your dog chewing on his tail, he cannot access his tail. He cannot access it, or it will never heal. And so you want the old e-collar, the old Elizabethan e-collar that you can get at a vet, or some pet stores still carry the older ones. Maybe check Amazon or chewyyourdog.com. But you want the old plastic, hard plastic kind that is so long from the neck, his nose can't touch the tail, right? Because if it stops right here at his nose, and then he's gonna be able to chew his tail, right? Like, we need it to be like stopping, let me do it this way. We need to be stopping way past so that he can't reach his tail. And so it's gonna be inconvenient for a while, several weeks probably, while his tail heals, and to make sure he's not gonna go back at it. So you wanna keep it on hand just in case. But it's gotta be that old school kind, because it's the only kind that really stops your dog from getting parts of his body. Wrapping his tail to his leg. So this is something with Castor, our pit bull, who had the ear problems because he was so strong. We actually had to do like a butterfly wrap. So we would just take his ears, fold them up, and tape them together up here. So when he shook his head, he couldn't flap his ears and make the tips bleed and, you know, throw blood all over my house. It looked like a crime scene. So for the tail, you're going to have the same problem. When your dog gets happy, when he's playing, when he's wagging his tail, he is re-injuring that wound. And so you have to control that tail wag until it is healed, or it will just keep reopening. And then when it reopens, he's going to have that urge to chew on it. And so it's just going to be this negative feedback loop until we get this fixed. So what you want to do is, I find that taping the tail, so you can get like that, I don't think it's called athletic tape, but it's kind of like that gauzy tape. And you can wrap that around his tail, and then you can wrap his tail to his leg. And you can, choose a different leg every day, but you're going to want to wrap it to his leg. So when he tries to wag his tail, he can't. Okay. And it's not going to like ruin his happiness, but it is going to promote that healing. Okay. And that's super important to getting rid of the itch, right? Because if you have an itch, you want to scratch it. If you have a wound, he's going to want to lick it. That's a natural dog instinct. He's just doing it to an obsessive compulsive point that it's becoming harmful to him. So we need to prevent that urge. So wrapping that tail to his leg will prevent that re-injuring. And you can get really creative with that stretchy gauze wrap to make sure it's stable. But we've had really good success with that. A leash, when he's inside or when you're not home, keep a leash on him, because everywhere you go, he needs to go, so that you can watch him and be there to curb any urges to chew his tail. So even if he has a cone on and he can't reach it, a lot of people think, well, he's fine. He can't reach it. But if he still has the urges and you're not telling him what to do with those urges, as soon as that cone comes off, he's going to start chewing on his tail again. So this is where the training aspect comes in. And, I always tell people training is simple. Simple doesn't always mean easy, right? There is an accountability on your part. There is a maintenance and a observation point from you that needs to be present in order to teach your dog how to handle this urge. And so having that leash on, even with his cone, if he starts to do the spinny circles or sniffing towards his rump or trying to chew his tail, you're going to give that leash a little tug to distract him back to you. Hey, buddy, come here, look at me. Get your chew toy. And you can have a chew bone, a chewy Kong, whatever his go-to chew toy is. That's what he needs to take his chewing urges out on. And if you're consistent enough with this, you will get to the point where my Schnauzer, because he had skin allergies his whole life until we learned about acupuncture and chiropractic care and raw food, he would get to the point where he'd be licking himself. And before we could even interrupt him to say that was too much, he would stop and either go find a toy to chew on or just lay down and go to sleep. And so he started to redirect his own naughty behaviors, his own excessive behaviors, to a healthy outlet. That's something you need to teach your German Shepherd to do as well. So as he gets those urges to get his tail, distract him. That's why the leash is there, so you can tug it with you and be like, hey, come here, buddy, let's get this toy. And then immediately make that toy more exciting than the tail. So you have to dance it around. You have to talk in that squeaky voice. And like, let's get your Kong. Look at your Kong. So he's like, yeah, my Kong's great. That's great. And he wants to chew on it. If your dog doesn't chew or doesn't like toys, depending on your dog's weight, we don't want to cause an overweight problem in addition to the tail problem. But if your dog is a little bit hefty, you can take the Kong and you're going to need a couple because you're going to rotate them. But you can put saran wrap around it. So the big hole is on top and the little tiny holes on the bottom. Put saran wrap around it, fill it up with water, and freeze it. So it's a big ice cube. So when he starts chewing on his tail or trying to get to his tail, you can be like, hey, let's go get your Kong. And you can present him that Kong so that it's something to entice him to want to chew on it. And then you can start putting less and less water in it so that he's just chewing on it and there's maybe a little bit of like a quarter size water at the tip. And then eventually he'll just be chewing on his Kong without you having to freeze it and making you work for it as well. If your dog's not overweight, so let's say he's underweight or at an ideal weight, which isn't as common. Most dogs are a little bit heftier. So we always do the ice cube or the water trick for us, but you can put a little bit of peanut butter in there. So don't fill the whole thing with peanut butter, but a little bit of peanut butter and then some water. Maybe you can put some treats in there too, so they're frozen into the water. And it can be just a funner surprise for him. If you want to add treats to an overweight dog's Kong full of water, you can add carrots. I would stick with vegetables, no fruits, because fruits are sugar. They do add to weight problems. But Morgan's her favorite is carrots, sweet potatoes, green beans. You can give a little bit of broccoli, but it will make your dog gassy, just like people. But yeah, healthy fruits, healthy vegetables. You can Google what's safe for dogs online. Most of them are. There's some that are not, so do Google it to make sure what you're giving them is okay. But those are ways to help distract him from his tail during this healing process. When it's time for the cone to come off, the leash still needs to be on for several weeks, okay, if not a month. And that is because if he starts to go back to that tail, you need to be there to redirect his attention, that proper chewing alternative, the toy, bone, whatever it is, so that he no longer has this compulsion to get his tail. It is a behavior. It is a bad habit. And if you have a bad habit, you know how hard it is to drop it, right? Dogs suffer the same problems. So you need to be his advocate. You need to be the person that's there to tell him, no, not the tail, get your bone. And so that he's completely over the tail chasing. But like I said, if it's a medical problem, if it's an underlying medical problem, the training that we're going to be doing right now is only preventative. He's always going to have that urge to go back to his tail, no matter how much you redirect him, because something's wrong inside of him. Okay, so this is only if it's like an OCD behavior where it's just a mental problem that he has this urge to go for, which I'm not leaning towards because it just happened the last few months and he was like a year and a half old. A 3-year-old, yeah. So it just happened this last 3 months, okay? So that tells me something's changed inside of him. Or externally stress with COVID, that's totally a possibility. So make sure you can figure out if it is something internal. Check out those alternative medicine sources I mentioned. And if it is stress, alleviate that stress with some CBD. Try to have a very strict routine with your dog. And then that training prevention stuff will help alleviate that chewing need as well. So thanks so much for joining me. I do hope this helps Julie with your Shepherd. I know how frustrating and painful it can be for you and him to witness this pain. But I pray that you guys can get it resolved. And if you have more questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thanks again for joining us, and we'll be back next week on our next Facebook Live. Bye, everyone.